to Now Departing Ordinary.
Thanks for having me.
You're not an ordinary person. And
I guess
it shows.
Not. Really? Why do you say that?
You like look good. You're like walking around like, yo, what up?
I'm very inconspicuous.
Yeah, that's how I describe you to
I
all my
don't.
friends.
How am I described?
Like, you know that like very inconspicuous guy?
Yeah, no. I blend into the community. I never hear anything at all like about. Yeah, no. How am I described?
No, I normally not. Just like, oh yeah, that's my neighbor. He's super cool. And now you're going to be on my podcast, and we're going to talk about all the fun and interesting shit that you get up to, because
yes.
you're doing some different stuff. Different from, a tech worker, a 9-to-5er.
Yeah, it's pretty different. It's pretty weird. I did not expect to do it at all.
Yeah. So we also have another guest on the podcast today. This is Melion. He will be asking really hard-hitting questions.
I'm prepared. I have my notebook. I'll have to defer to a couple notes and stats.
So where them treats at, though? All right. So to get started, introduce yourself, where you're from, what you're doing. Like, give us the spiel.
I am Alain Stephens. I'm an investigative reporter. I specialize in gun violence in the criminal justice system. And I'm from, I guess I live in Southern California. I'm from Texas. I moved here from Austin maybe 4 years ago or something like that. And so, but yeah, my job out here is to be the Western correspondent. So to cover pretty much all gun crime west of the Mississippi. And so, yeah, right. So it's like expansive. And it happens to be probably some of the most armed part of America, right? So we're talking about, like Texas and stuff like that, Missouri, Wyoming and stuff like that. But also we're talking about Los Angeles, right? Like, and like Sacramento and some place like that, Modesto.
Oh, yeah.
Vegas.
Yeah.
Right? And so, right, when you think of those types of shootings, that all kind of fell under like my purview as a reporter initially, or my coverage area.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's a huge lift. So.
Okay. I also don't think that we talked about this, but I also moved here from Austin. Like 4
no,
years
yeah,
ago.
no, I did. Yeah, I remember I felt like there was an Austin vibe to you. I was
now
like,
this part of the blog.
Yeah, and like also I think it was like the tattoos and like you had a motorcycle.
Yeah, I did.
And
like, I brought from Austin, yeah.
And see?
Yeah.
I know y'all.
Yeah.
So I'm very familiar.
You got a motorcycle. You came from Austin.
Exactly. Like there's like a certain Austin type of like look, right?
Uh-huh.
And so, and you had it. It's very thin, like Underville. It's like a little, like Lone Star beer.
Yes.
Kind of, like,
Topo Chico.
Yeah, Topo Chico. With like, black jeans.
Yep.
Everyone's wearing black jeans.
Gotta have black jeans. It's indispensable.
Like, so. I was like, oh, hey.
I see you.
Hey.
There's only one place you could be from.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So you came out here. Did you come out here for work, or were you like coming out here and then work lined up?
No, and so I came out here for work. I came out here for another investigative reporting job. And I absolutely hated it, right? I came out here, and so, I really had this fascination with gun violence, right?
Okay.
And then I kind of got to this particular outlet, and they weren't really so fascinated in that. In fact, they weren't really fascinated in crime or anything like that at all.
Wow.
And so, for me, that was just super intensely boring.
Yeah.
And I was right and they were wrong. Like, I'm just saying, like,
there's no other way to slice it.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing about news is that it's new, right?
Yeah.
It's like in the wording, right? And so it's constantly fluctuating, it's constantly changing and stuff like that. And so beats are opening up the American conversation, and the need, right, for context on certain things is constantly fluctuating. And so the beats that you have at a newspaper, right, 10 or 20 years ago may not be the beats you need now, right? And so like transportation would look totally different as a beat. Meanwhile, there are certain things that like, say even out here, you may have had like a livestock reporter or something like 50 or 60 years ago. You don't have that. Then you may move to an airline reporter, and then it's like, and now you have tech reporters.
Yeah.
Right? You have
so
people
true.
who have like, you report full time on like digital security. Right? And so.
Pause. Gonna nip this in the bud. Edit that out. No, my dog yelling. Excuse me. I can see that's gonna happen like a million
Yeah, like
times.
everyone's walking their dogs like.
Yeah, and they're like, I need to yell at every single one of you. Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's always fluctuating, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, but news is also very subjective, right?
Totally.
As like an industry, and so the things that you would imagine in kind of like television shows and stuff, when you see like editors like yelling and all this other stuff, that's pretty true. That kind of like hides in there, right? Like there's a lot of that that's still kind of like rampant in there. And so, I was at a place where I was kind of clashing heads with one of these old people who was like, this is the way it's been done. Like, this is the way news is here. And I was like, man, this gun thing, I feel like I need to stick on this. There was something that drove me on that. And so I did. And paid off, right? So, yeah.
Okay. So you have been here working in that job for 4 years. Or it's
so
like
let's
kind of
see.
Transitioned. What has your journey been like since starting with this type of journalism and that?
Oh my God. Well, let me just back up. Maybe I should talk about okay, so let me just talk about the industry first. Let me just paint a picture.
Yeah.
Okay, so the journalism industry, and I love this too, because people read the news, right? It's almost like school, right?
Yeah.
Everyone has an opinion on like education, right? Because they're like, I've been to school.
Yeah.
But that's like totally different than like figuring out how to like systemically run an educational system with teachers that get paid and like all, right? It's a totally different thing. And so a similar thing with journalism, right? You watch TV, you grow up around news, you grow up around newspapers and magazines and stuff. So everyone thinks they kind of understand it. And they don't. And so what I tell people is, right, that right now when you think of the media, okay, people kind of hate the media.
Yeah.
The media, like, quote unquote, they're like, fuck them, right? And so, but the idea of a journalist is still like a pretty lofty profession, right? It's still very idealistic. And so because of that, there's, it's still something that's like the protagonists of novels and then, movies and stuff and all this other junk, and right, and it's still at the crux of it is like, you're going to go to Washington and you're going to use your First Amendment right and all this other junk.
Yeah.
And so because of that, it draws more people than there are, bona fide paying jobs. And so the industry can be super selective with who gets it. It's almost like trying to be like a pilot or something, right? And so the typical journalist is someone who's, highly educated. They are usually well-traveled. They usually have worked, typically for a number of years, underpaid or unpaid in a bad market before they land that job that really like secures them. And then in there, even once you get in the ranks, people kind of breathe a sigh of relief, like, I'm a journalist. And then your general assignment, right, before you even get a special.
Gotcha.
And so it's like a pretty rough type of thing. And they can be pretty, like I said, they could funnel a lot of people in. This is not my story whatsoever.
Oh, okay.
Right? Like, so that's why I paint that picture, because that's kind of like the world that I inhabit.
Path. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, for me, I I didn't think that I would ever do journalism or anything really as a serious thing at all. I did journalism in high school. I did broadcast journalism in high school, and I was good at it. I remember my teacher making me like a copy editor because she had like a contest for editing, and I like somehow won or something. And then, I remember she like went to when I was graduating, she went to my parents, and my parents were kind of like, she was like, I think you should be like a journalist. I think maybe you should do this.
Wow.
But like my parents are like, this is not a real job. This is not a real thing. And and at the time I'm growing up in a suburb of like Dallas where guess what? It's not a real job, right? It's not a real job at all. And so, my grandparents were in the military. My dad was in the military. And so they're like, you're going to be in the military. And so I went into the Coast Guard and I worked in the Gulf of Mexico, and then and then I was in the Air Force, where I was in Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana.
Okay.
And during this time I started going and getting my education and all this other stuff, because my plan was, I'm going to work in law enforcement, and I work in local law enforcement in a city outside of Dallas. And but my aspirations to be like an FBI agent. I've literally applied to all of them: Secret Service, CIA, ATF, DEA, Bureau of Indian Affairs, like all sorts of agencies that people are like, oh, they have like a federal law enforcement component. I applied to it because that's what I thought was going on. That's what I thought my mission was going to be, and that's what I studied in school. I studied the criminal justice system.
Okay.
I studied sociology. I studied that type of stuff. Again, not journalism, right? Meanwhile, I just want to let you know. Meanwhile, these other people are like going into the Peace Corps, and they're going to like Yale for writing and stuff like that. I'm over here in like Barksdale, Louisiana. I'm in these like really crappy places doing this odd work, right? But during all of this, I'm actually really close to hitting some of these jobs with the feds. And but the fiscal cliff hits, and they're kind of like, they're kind of like, yo, we're gonna like hold a lot of these positions. And so it's in that someone says, this is kind of fucking crazy now when I look back at it. It's insane. But someone goes, hey, I think, we're listening to public radio, and someone goes, I think you could do this. It's true. Yeah. And so I don't know what, it was almost like an indignant courage, almost like a prankster type of attitude.
Okay.
Where I was like, you know what? I can do this. You know what? I ought to call him right now. Like, I'm going to do it right now. And so I was like, here, I'm dialing, and like someone answers. And my first thing is I said, hey, I don't know anything about radio or any of this stuff, but I would like to come in and just do like a tour, just to see like what is even working behind the scenes. And I just happened to call up the right time, because here's the thing with public radio. They're like a nonprofit, and so they can take volunteers. Other people have gotten into this. Jimmy Kimmel actually got his start as public radio volunteer. Did not know that. Yeah, there's some other people in there as well. You may have to fact check me on this, but I believe like Diane Reeves may have been a volunteer. There's a couple of people who just got in there. But for me at the time, I don't know all this. And so early on in the job, they put me in as a booker on this like talk show. So I'm like really behind, but I fall in love with it. I don't know anything about journalism. I like run to the local library. You're from Austin, like the Austin Public Library. Of course, they have a book, the NPR handbook. Yeah. The NPR handbook, right? And so I read this thing. I'm reading like all the rules like really quick. I mean, fast, like at the pool, like tanning. Just like, okay, they like longer stories, collect the audio, just real fast stuff. Like kind of just doing it real quick and together. But I remember everyone was searching for someone who knew how to defuse bombs. And no one could find this person. And I was like, oh, like what you need is like an explosive ordnance disposal person. And like, I know that person who to contact from the Air Force. And they kind of turned and they were like, wait a second, we're going to keep you around. Because they were like, there's some sort of like skill set that they saw, right? In that arena. But I was still supposed to be kind of in the background. They were, you know, supposed to be a booker. They were like, we're definitely not going to keep you out front. And then the weird thing happened was, so they put me at night. They hired me after that, and they put me on this like weird night shift again, just kind of doing, just like doing bookings and stuff like that. Just like really, you know, writing what they call readers. And so readers are like, you know, you have segments, right, in public radio that are like, you know, the news stories where it's like people have gone out and recorded stuff, right, out in the street. But then, you know, the host every once in a while comes in and is like, oh, you know, oil prices today. I would write those things, these like 4-sentence little, so right. And this was like really easy work. And so while I was there, you know, while I didn't know really the inner workings of journalism, the inner workings of radio and all this other stuff, I did have the principles of investigation. Okay. Right? And so, because I had studied that and I kind of came from that. And so, in my first like month, right, which is stupid now. I go back and I'm like, what are you thinking, right? It takes years for most people to do their investigation. In my first month, I crack off an investigation. Wow. Right? Like, I just like crack one out. And people are like, what? Like, how did you even come across this? I'm like, I asked, right? I just kind of went around. I was like, hey, yeah, I did. I just like started going around just kind of being like, hey, I'm at a radio station. Like, you got any stories? And like, man, you'll be surprised how I ain't trying to throw people under the bus for like other journalists, how apparently no one had done that. Like, no one had just done that. It's just like, I'm the night shift guy. Don't throw me the good stuff. Throw me your problems. That's the other thing, right? Like, don't like, because if you say throw me a story, the community will be like, dogs and cats need to be, you know, adopted. And we're like, well, we know that. Yeah. But if you're like, no, throw me something that needs to get fixed. People are like, huh? A journalist is asking for this? What is this Is this a book? Is this real life? And I was shook, right? Because as this outsider, right, I thought that's what the job was. The only thing that I had was the ideal of journalism. Okay. Right? Yeah. I only had the ideal of, I was like, yeah, this is what we're supposed to do, right? We're supposed to look for the problems and dig up the crap. And so I did that, and it copped all these awards. What? Right? Amazing. Yeah, it copped all these awards. KUT Austin's public radio station. Yep. They got investigative reporting awards. Those are mine. And no, but like, yeah, you know. And so, well, it was also something they didn't do. They were like, what? We don't do, like, public radio doesn't do investigations. We're nice. We give out socks. Like, we don't make enemies. And I was like, I'm making enemies. Yeah. And at the time, I was punching at the government, right? The capital of Texas. And so, and so they thought I got lucky, right? And this is why I tell this part of, like, the story, because it's like, you know, what's harder than making the, like, Thriller album? It's making the bad album, right? And so a lot of people saw me as kind of like a lucky dude. They were just like, this guy came out here from, you know, not the traditional means, right? And he didn't run the internships. He didn't do the writing courses, right? Yeah. He didn't do the stuff. And so he's got this investigative reporting award. And I just had this real passion, though, for it. Like, I was addicted after that, right? I was addicted. And so, yeah. And so I was like, I'm going to do it again. And so this one was something that I wanted to tackle. So I'll tell you what the stories are, to be honest. So the first story is I had found out that there's a loophole in the Fair Labor Standards Act, right? So the Fair Labor Standards Act was put in the 1930s to ensure people have stuff like, you know, minimum wage, and that we don't like employ children in like bad factories and stuff like that. But there's a loophole in it. It says that if you have an intellectual disability, right, that doesn't apply to you.
Really?
Yeah. And so what I had found out was the state of Texas had these facilities where they had people living with intellectual disabilities and working with intellectual disabilities and contracting, and they would contract people with intellectual disabilities, and they're paying pennies an hour. Oh. So people were working, right, and we're talking about weeks on end, and they would collect a month's paycheck would be like $12. And the way they would get these contracts, right, is they were like, we are doing a service because we are giving these people something to do. It was like this really paternalistic kind of like, but they were getting free labor.
Yeah.
Essentially, or like damn near free labor.
Yeah.
And so that was the first story. And like, and I was very, I was like, hey, this is like totally messed up on the government. The government also, the state of Texas said like, we are not supposed to do this. And they were doing it anyway. Wow. And so, but the second story was like where it got a little bit crazier. Mm-hmm. And so the second story was a much harder story, a much more difficult story. And it involved a kid in Katy, Texas.
Okay.
And he was at a house party. And he was invited by his older brother. His older brother had never invited him to, these like older kid parties and stuff like that. And he was like, he begged and said, okay, fine, you can come, right? And so they're two brown kids, right? Their mom doesn't speak English. And they go to this house party of this like high school like football jockey, like retired, right? Like, well, he didn't retire. I mean, he went to college, right? But he comes back and has this party, and it's like all high schoolers are there. And so anyway, they see these brown kids get there, and this guy, this high school guy, he's really high, and he starts, he gets all his former football player friends, and a fight breaks out, and they're beating on the guy who I report on, this guy's older brother, with like golf clubs and stuff. So he brings out a pocket knife and he stabs him. And at the time, right, Texas is pretty harsh, but he's 14 at the time, and they put him for 99 years.
What?
Yeah.
Outrage.
99 years. And so, and what they did was they used a thing where it's like, so if you send a kid in the criminal justice system to the adult, right, prison system, you're supposed to you're supposed to go through this pretty stringent, essentially process where you kind of like go and you see like, hey, do they torture, animals? Do they show no remorse? Are they part of like an organized criminal infrastructure? Are they like a hitman or something, right, for a cartel? But they didn't do that. They had done this process that attorneys had essentially, they called it rubber stamping.
Okay. Right?
And so essentially they're like, did this kid commit the crime? Do you want to send him to the adult prison system? And you just kind of check yes. And they would. Like,
you look brown. We want to send you away forever.
For 99 years, right? And so, and the crazy thing is that I found out that in a 10-year process, I know it's so intense. It's so intense. That in a 10-year process, the state had essentially done this thousands of times over.
What? Thousands?
To thousands of kids. And like, in fact, they were doing them as like on average or something like 3 or 4 a week or something.
Wow.
And and it had actually found a loophole, right, in the law that allowed them to do this, and the loophole essentially closed. And so it was that story that, after that, like, people kind of took notice and was like, yo, no one's looking at violence. No one's looking at race. No one's looking at this criminal justice system like that. And even though people at my own station and stuff like didn't support that, because the other thing is I was the first black person they hired in 10 years, the only black reporter in public radio in the state of Texas at the time. And so the other thing about everything that I said, right, about it being super affluent and like the people that can make it to that system also, I'm just saying, are white, right? And so that was like a huge barrier to me as well. And so, yeah, especially down south, like I'll keep it real. If you look up my station, you'll see things about a lot of racism. A lot, like people would come to me, I had an editor come to me and straight up say some high school bullying crap, just like. Ugh. Just come up and say, you don't have what it takes to do an investigative report. You want to be an investigative reporter? You don't have what it takes. In front of people, in front of everyone.
Wow.
Right? But fortunately, I found outside believers. I started cold calling just these seasoned reporters across the nation. I was like, no one's helping me. Yeah. No one's helping me. And they helped, right? Some of these people answered the phone, right? These just prolific people would be like, what? And I'd be like, yo, I'm just this kid who, this is my background, and I'm just trying to like come after the criminal justice system. I'm trying to just figure out how do I rip documents out of a police department, right? Like how do I access this? Is there a way? Is there an attorney how can I fight for this?
Yeah.
And so, and one of the things that you learn as a reporter, right, and maybe this is what was making me almost a good investigative reporter, was that like for every person that like hung up, right, like someone else would answer. Like you didn't even care about that person, right? And so, I've called up all sorts of people. I called him Marty Barron, right? I contacted Marty Barron. He was played by Liev Schreiber on the movie Spotlight. Okay. And like, he's like kind of this like main, expose the Catholic Church, right? Absolute jerkwad, and I'll say that on the record, right? Just doesn't respond to anyone. But,
sorry.
Right.
Gotta contain the beasts.
Oh, it's fine.
They're like really starving for attention. They're like, I want to be on a podcast. I have never been on one. Okay, go lay down. Anyway.
I mean, yeah. And so, these people supported me. And so I got into a lot of mess. And the rest ended up kind of being history, I guess. I ended up finding some outside people who said, listen, like, fuck your station. Yeah. They're like, we'll finance you. They're like, we're looking for someone with some ideas. Pitch us an idea. And my idea was guns. Yeah. And I did a crazy investigation. And after that, I was just like so nestled into the gun world that simultaneously we started having all these mass shootings. And by then I was almost like the forward observer or something. It was kind of like, right, this mass shooting conversation all of a sudden started happening, right? Like Parkland and stuff started happening. And then we just didn't stop talking about it. But again, like I said, this reporting world is super small, right? And it's very curated, but they didn't have anyone that knew anything about guns. And so there's this like scramble, and here I was this guy who was like already about knee deep into the criminal justice system, who was like investigating all these federal agencies, and then like that's how I kind of got into this beat.
Okay, dang. So there's a lot of context there. Yeah, let's make sure that the limbs stay intact.
So.
Yeah. Wow. So you
I know that's like through a lot. Is that a lot? Is that too much information for you?
That is the perfect amount of information, and I'm sure that people are gonna be like, "What?" I mean, but like, it makes sense. You're in Texas, which is very not liberal. There's like pockets, right? But like the state overall is very conservative. I'm like, pretty known for being racist.
No, it's weird. Okay, so people, let me just break down some stuff about like, just like a little bit about like the media, right? Yeah. Like, cause like, so everyone's kind of like, yo, the media, right? Mm-hmm. As if we're all like this homogenous group. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. We're very competitive. Remember the idea of like scooping each other and getting a story first. And there's been times where I've spent months on a story, and had to just can it because someone else got it. Boom, that was the exact story that you're going to do. And that's just part of the game.
Dang.
Right? But it's very competitive. And you have people stealing, like we're secretive. There's plenty of times, regular occurrence, where I go into a meeting and editors are like, hey, throttle back. We're looking for a partnership, but we're not going to give them our best. We're going to, like, don't give that idea. Like, don't run your mouth on this.
You're like third option.
Yeah, there's stuff like that going on. And so, but what does happen is that, like all the stuff that I was saying before, right? The journalism pool is very small. Mm-hmm. And that means they get typically, like, who's the person that could be well-traveled, that could go to, like, maybe, like, a really good school, get, you know, really good education in something that's lofty as, like, English or writing, right? And then, you know, whether, like, 4 or 5 years of, like, unpaid labor, essentially, in, like, the Wisconsin Gazette, whatever, right? And so it typically is coastal elites. Like, I'm just going to put that out there. And it's just, like, not, like, it's just, and so, you know, and they're all my homies. They're all my friends. I'm buddies. They're all my homies in Brooklyn. Like, what's up? Right? All my dudes in San Fran, like, keeping it real. But, like, it's true. It's just, like, you know. It is how it is. It is how it is. And because, like, those are the people that, like, survive it. Like, I know plenty of people that go to journalism school and they work in advertising, like, right out the gate, because it's like you go over and you're like, what? I got to go to the Kansas City, whatever, so and work at 3 a.m. or something. Or I could just go ahead and I have student loans to pay today. Yeah. And so, and typically that is where the gap is essentially kind of expanded, where, it's typically a lot of the same people. Yeah. Now, here's the problem. When you come from the same background, racial background, perhaps cultural background, economic background, here we go. The way you perceive the world and the conclusions that you draw, are typically the same. The other thing is you tend to value the same things, and you tend to value each other's successes. So if you see, like, the Washington Post will look over at, say, the New York Times, and those editors who both are, like, born and raised from Connecticut and, like, both have the same, you know, backgrounds and stuff, are going to look at each other and be like, oh, that was a good story. That should have been us. And both of those, like, it's all those shits are, here's the problem. With all these people from the same backgrounds, right? They value the same things, same perspective. The news sounds the same. Yeah. And so this is what people kind of perceive. They perceive this, like, giant, you know, kind of media conspiracy group thing. Yep. The reality is it's just kind of the same, you know, 5 guys from the same, you know, backgrounds, you know, patting each other on the back for the same types of stories. And some good journalism is still, like, done out of that, but also some real journalism is kind of, like, missed out of that. Really? Right. And, you know, here's a problem, right? Because, like, at the end of the day, you know, journalism, right, is very like the military, right? It's a little bit like the military. And what I mean by that is, like, everything in the military is to serve the fighting force, right? So, So everything the Air Force is to serve essentially bomb droppers. Everything the Army is essentially to serve, right, the guys on the ground with guns. Like, everything's in support of that. So all that support stuff, though, even though that's, like, the majority of it, like, there's more plane people, right, delivering supplies and more, like, water tank people than there are, you know, it's still all in support of kind of, like, this kind of core journalism, you know, core kind of, like, fighting force thing. Yeah. Right. And so, you know, while a whole outlet may have, you know, floors and floors of, like, people doing SEO and art and, like, producing and all this other stuff, the main thing that we get paid for is information. Yeah. Yeah. Right? Like, you know, we don't, like, and we kind of got confused over that. Like, many people in journalism, I think, got confused. We thought, like, we start getting paid for the content, right? The clip, right? The website build out, and no, what we get paid for is information. Yeah. And I could prove it, right? If I had, right, like, the Donald Trump P dossier tape, I could write that story in crayon. And I'm going to get paid. Yeah. Right. I'll be a highly valued journalist with that. And so, you know, and this is a problem when these people come from the same kind of background, because if you look at kind of you know, the intelligence gathering institutions, like I'm just going to say something very blunt. Even the FBI knows that if you want to infiltrate the Black Panthers, you have to hire Black people.
Yeah.
Right? Like the CIA, like the most despicable, guys are like, you want to destabilize Iran, right? You're going to have to hire some Iranians. Only in like Detroit, right? Or like a bunch of editors going to be at the newspaper. They're all white being like, we got this. We understand every corner of the city. We got this. And so it's like a weird thing. Right. And so it actually is like a barrier to information on just a variety of different things. Mm-hmm. And it's just not even race. The fact that I am from Texas and from the background that I come from, right. The biggest thing for me as a gun reporter is just my familiarity with firearms. Yeah. Right. Like I don't come in and I'm like, yo, like, I'm not here to talk politics, but like I understand that AR-15, right? I understand how it breaks down. Like I understand the technicalities of that. I use that in my reporting. Uh-huh. And so that is just something that like when I go to work, other reporters are just like, and that's actually how I got really valued in the gun space from just a very simple job. I was doing mass shooting identifications. Ah. Right? So these mass shootings come out and they're always like, what did they use? And unfortunately, I was the dude where they're like, hey, what did they use? And like, I was like, let me see. And be like, like, and they're like, hey, that's kind of useful. And so, but that comes from having people from like different backgrounds. Right. Yeah, and totally. So if I had to like stock a place, it would look crazy. It would look like, you would have people, it would look like the Avengers or something with all these people with all these different powers, or like the X-Men or something like that, right? Who've been from all these different places. And like, look at me, like I'm like covered in tattoos. I'm like, I wear jeans and stuff like that. I can't infiltrate, say, like the White House. Like, don't send me to go into like the lobbying world. Yeah. But like the criminal crime world, the police world, like I'm pretty okay there. Yeah,
they're like, you can be here. That's fine.
Yeah.
You can chill.
Well, they're just like, how much do you bench? I'm like,
like, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Let me show you.
Here. Yeah. So, but yeah. And I actually say that too. Like a lot of journalists don't, some people are like, what? Like you have all these tattoos and all this other stuff. And that's a little atypical as well. Uh-huh. And so, but I also say that as well because like when you kind of have that philosophy that like my job is to actually connect with certain portions of the community, I need to represent those portions of the community, right? And so I'm like, if I'm just going to tell you the truth, I see TV news. We live in an area right here where the TV news is out here all the time. Yeah. They look unreal if they approach you, right? Especially for something serious, like besides like, what do you think about the fair here, right? And they're all fake tanned and all made up and all this other stuff with their like weird, body con, like kind of business dress. It's like only made for like TV news. Like you're kind of like not going to give like the most genuine answer, right? But if I come up and I'm like sipping a cup of coffee and I'm like, yo, I'm a reporter and like, and I don't even really care about the minor stuff. Yeah. I always let that go. It's like, I don't like, a lot of people are like, where do you work? What are you doing? You're like, I shouldn't be out here. I'm supposed to be on break. Like, I don't want to give my name. I kind of come in and I'm like, hey, I don't even care about that. Do you hear shootings ever at night? And people are like, yes. Yeah, let me tell you. They're like, what? And I'm like, yeah. And so, I started showing up to work and was just like start showing up in sweatpants and people were kind of like, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm trying to fit my beat. Right?
Yeah.
I'm dressing for my beat. And so that's what happened.
That's all. I mean, yeah, it makes sense because like you approach someone and you're casual, like they're going to talk to you conversationally.
Yeah, I mean, so here's the thing. Like I was out with some SWAT operators not too long ago. Now, right? And I was actually out with a bunch of shooters too. People in this gun space. Now I'm going to tell you, if like you run my name in like any sort of circle or anything, right? Like there's going to be some controversy. You probably have some opinions. Like I've came pretty hard on policing and police systems, particularly aggressive policing. I'm very critical of the criminal justice system. And also just, the company I work for now, The Trace, right? We're 24/7 gun violence nonprofit, so we're just on it.
Yeah.
Right? Has collections of enemies. Like, because, nobody has feelings on guns. And so, right, I've kind of lucked out in certain periods. Like, I've been on Twitter and people have been like, yo, I hate his outlet, but he's fine. And I've walked in some of these spaces wearing the t-shirt with the label on it, but because I also project a different image, just a more realistic image, they could kind of pull out some sort of connection.
Yeah.
But the other thing too is that it just mostly shocks people, because people are like, you're a journalist? Like, what? Like, that's like, you write? Like, I always thought, they were dweebs, and I was like, and I'm trying to cover for them. I'm like, no, they all look like this, and they all, no.
Yeah,
They're
actually,
all
this is
like
what we all
me.
look like. This is
Yeah.
the uniform.
I will say this. Everyone from Vice seemed to be fucking awesome.
Yeah.
I've worked with Vice, and like, they all were like how they were on the, like, so cool with like the coolest glasses and haircuts.
Yes.
Like, and it was like a match made in heaven when I worked with them. They're like, they looked me up and down and were kind of like, okay, like, that's what we expected. And I was like, because, they all look their beat, right?
Yeah.
They're like the, Miss Frizzles of like...
So true.
It is. They're like Miss Frizzles, that they would always send that like one girl who's just like starkly blonde to just like deadpan interview extremists.
Yes.
And she would just, why are you an extremist? And it was just amazing. Like, those guys were awesome.
And how do you take your coffee while you're an extremist?
Yeah, exactly. All white. I don't even know. Like it's just all cream.
Yeah.
Like,
cream with a dash of coffee.
Yo, I mean, to be honest, in a white supremacist space, this is a bonus tidbit. I don't know. I mean, you can't put this out here. Like, I feel like already, like, I forget. You're like trying not to get demonetized. I'm on like these. But
You
like,
probably know more than me. I'm like, I don't know.
But yeah, milk chugging is like something, that they like do.
It's so
look it up.
Milk chugging. Okay, everyone, we're gonna look up milk chugging.
Don't. I mean, like, don't, like, don't get converted to extremism out
actually,
here. Okay.
We have another ad for you.
Yeah.
Like, the opposite of milk chugging.
Just, you can look it up on the ADL or something like that. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, the SPLC will have information on the value of milk in white supremacist extremist spaces. Damn. Yeah.
Okay.
This
is definitely not a rabbit hole that I've gone down. Let me tell you.
Yeah, well, that is the intersection of like my beat. That's like something I had to get on to. When people are like, oh, so you work for a place and they're 24/7 guns, people are like, don't y'all run out of stuff to do? And I'm like, no, man.
This
like,
is the United States. What do you think?
like, oh no. And it's like, no, even with like 20 some odd people working right on this, like, we're still broken up into beats that we are like still drinking from a fire hose.
Wow.
Right. So like there's people 24/7, they cover the lobby. Right. Like our guy, Mike Spees, his reporting is actually what put the NRA in bankruptcy court. And like, and so like, but that guy is a 24/7 job to do because there's so much crazy stuff. And then we have local teams in some of America's hotspot cities, right? So that are doing reporting in places like Chicago and, Atlanta, Philly, right? And so, places like that. And then you got me, which I'm kind of sitting in the investigative division, where we're like in like long-term things where, my specialty is actually maybe the coolest labeled specialty. Yeah. So I am an emerging, so my specialty is emerging violence. Yeah. And
it's like the new artist, but the new violence.
Yeah, that's essentially you've read me. No, like, no, but no, that's exactly what it is. It's new weapons technology, new tactics by traffickers, and essentially the response of law enforcement to this. And so, I reported a lot on ghost guns. I've reported a lot on automatic conversion devices. So turning, things like Glocks and AR-15s into machine guns. And just also new ways of people trafficking, right? So, trafficking, arms trafficking is kind of back. And
2023, baby.
Yeah, it's almost like the 80s, man. I said that. I said that to this ATF agent. I was like, dude, like, Russia's invading, and we got, like, dudes out on the street with, like, machine pistols again. I'm like, this is Miami Vice. Like,
yeah.
like, like, it's getting wild out here. And so, yeah,
Wow. I mean, it has been enough time that, like, the 80s would come back in fashion at this point. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I dress this way. I'm like in the 80s, like, I'm in like a men's crop top because I'm just like, hey, I should just wear like a headband.
Yeah,
so.
Stay ready,
yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so what is something that you're working on a podcast right now? Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Cool. So yeah, I'm working on a podcast with WBUR, which is Boston's public radio. It's their Boston's NPR member station. And it's called The Gun Machine, How America Was Forged by the Gun Industry. And essentially it is America's secret history of the relationship between the government and the firearms industry. I think we have this idea when it comes to guns in America that the government is either kind of like beholden by the gun industry, or maybe on the flip side of it that they're trying to take away all these guns. But when you look at it as almost like a business equation, like nothing could be further from the truth, right? Since the inception of this country, we have supported the firearms industry, right? And we still support the firearms industry with billions of dollars of incentives, right? And there's a reason for that. Part of it is because it's a tradition that we've had since the inception of this country.
Yeah.
But also it's part of how America projects power.
Yeah.
And part of it is also because it's a little bit of like a snowball effect. It's kind of like a train that maybe has like kept going and has gained so much momentum that like we can't stop it.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I tell people that when it comes to American gun violence, like we are a Spartan nation. And when you're a Spartan nation, you should expect to have a lot of stabbings. Right. And so, we talk about all those entities that support, right, the gun industry that you may not think about. And also kind of all of the death by 1,000 paper cuts. Like, I'm going to keep it real. Like, let's say some shocking things that are like, that I put out here that people are like, what? Wait a second. And so, for instance, right, when most of us think about gun violence, what do you think of?
I mean, school shootings.
Boom.
Theater
All right,
shootings,
stop it right there.
clubs.
Stop right there.
Yeah.
I love that you said it. That's perfect, right? And so that's exactly kind of the point. When we have this national conversation, we're having this visceral national conversation around gun violence. We're actually not having a conversation around gun violence. We're having a conversation around a very specific type of gun violence, which is the mass shooting.
Yeah.
What if I told you that all mass shootings only account for 2% of all gun violence victims? Right?
I guess that makes sense statistically. There can't be like
But when we have this conversation, we're talking about school security and we're talking about banning AR-15s.
Yeah.
And so why are we talking about that? And well, that's because that is typically the worst of the violence that has bled into kind of like the white habitus, right?
Yeah.
If we ban, I say this thing, right? If we banned AR-15s right now, America wouldn't feel any safer. I know it's going to sound controversial coming from, but the reason why is because when I pull recovery data from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, right? When I pull recovery data, the overwhelming majority of crimes committed, guns recovered at crime scenes, are pistols. Yeah. Right? Typically, rifles only account for like 13% or so. Wow. And that is all rifles, from like bolt action, hunting, all the way to like AK-47s to AR-15s and stuff. And there's a lot of really good reasons for that, right? Just like, let's just stop and think of criminal legitimacy. Yeah. Most criminals, right, want to get away with their crime. So they're looking for concealability. They're also looking for disposability. Both of those things are super hard to do with a rifle. I can't throw an AK down the drain. But also when I'm trying to steal something, right? If I do a smash and grab, which is a crazy way, like you smash and grab into a gun store, how many rifles can I throw into a pillowcase?
Yeah, not as many, not as quick.
Right. So most people are still running handguns out here, right, as a criminal pattern. And I just kind of go and say all this because we're killing each other, literally, but we're also killing each other in Congress. We're killing each other on phone calls and Thanksgiving dinners and stuff over this. And we're actually just talking about 2%. Yeah. But what if I told you, right, when it comes to just arms trafficking, walking a gun to Mexico for the cartel, right, that there was no federal arms trafficking law on the books until last year. So if you would do it, right, you would walk on these weaker charges like unlicensed seller. There was no, right, you would go on these like 18-month probations. And they would admit, like, I would see tapes, have interviews and stuff. You would admit, right, at agents who's like, we don't have anything, right, to put them on. And part of that is because the political polarization. So while everyone's fighting on like AR-15s and stuff, like someone's like, there's no arms trafficking, there's just basic stuff. And so let me tell you, because there is no arms trafficking law, the risk profile is low. When the risk profile is low, you want to know how much these people were making to walk a gun for the cartel? It's not like a trunk load of money. It's about $100.
Dang.
Because if you get caught, it's like, you go back to your normal ass life for the most part. Like, don't do it again. And so this is like how we're actually kind of getting, killed out here. There's 133 gun deaths a day, right?
Where? Just in the country in general?
Yes, in the country.
Okay.
And so, and the thing is that while when it comes to different other types of crime, it is true that we are safer, right? Yeah. You hear this, the crime, except for shootings, except for getting shot, right? In fact, in 2021, we actually topped our late 80s, early 90s peak. So if you walk a gun to Mexico, right, you're not going to get like a trunk load of money. It's not like Pulp Fiction or anything. Yeah. Right? You're going to get $100. Yeah. Right? Because if you're caught, you're essentially going back to your regular life for the most part. Like they're going to kind of slap you on the wrist and they're going to say, don't do that again. And so that's kind of the issue with, American gun violence. Let me give you another one, right? There's like 136 something thousand federal firearms licensed gun dealers, right, in the country. So it's a lot. Yeah. The ATF has got a total of 5,000 people. Since 1973, they've expanded by 1,000. Wow. So to give you a perspective, that is about half the DEA personnel, and that is 1/7 the FBI. And so it's not a lot of people, and most of these people, I think, out of those, it was like 700 to 900 are made to go around the country and inspect all of these gun dealers, right? Now, these gun dealers are everything from like really nice, like, top tier guys to, people sell their guns out of a garage. That is they call them mom and pop, kitchen counter gun dealers. You could do that. That's legal if you got the license. You could sell it, right? This is pawn shops. This is like some kind of like, and so of course, these places are like fronts for like arms trafficking or just like selling guns to criminals, right? Yeah. And so what we found is that through an investigation that when the ATF, first of all, the ATF routinely fails to hit their quota to inspect these guys once every 5 years, right?
Oh my gosh.
Once every 5 years, right? If they do find a violation, which they hardly ever get to any of these guys, right? Because there's just so many of them. When they do, so these are like the worst of the worst, they try to revoke them. The lengthy appeal process allows the dealer to stay in business, right? So it's like the opposite of like a health inspector. Yeah. Right. Health inspector comes in, you're making people sick. Like, you can't do this. Like, shut down and get it right until you can open. Like, that's not like this. You're like, you sell guns to like felons and gang members and they've been traced back to crimes. It's like, you can stay in business until you get your inventory back, right? Your stuff back in line. Right. And so, we did an investigation of this. We looked at thousands of documents, and what we found was that over half the time when inspector would go into the gun store and say, hey, these guys messed up. They've said that they sold guns to people who were like criminals. They lost guns. They can't find guns here. They've employed people that are criminals, like just crazy stuff. Over half the time, the management would downgrade the recommendations of the field inspectors' punitive action, most of the time sending in just a letter warning being like, hey, chill out. Y'all need to chill out on them. And so I say this because like I'm a little bit weird where people are like, oh, you write on gun violence? And I'm like, I'm not really like out here. Like I write on AR-15s. I identified AR-15s. I talk about their use in crimes and their powerful weapons and how they're used in crimes. But I also like to kind of just tell that story because like that's kind of, you and I are most likely going to get shot with a handgun. Yeah. You and I are going to most likely get hit with like some person who may have stolen that handgun or like got that handgun out of some dumb, stupid, pawn shop guy who don't really care because the guy didn't get inspected. And like, that's the chain of death. That's what I call the aggregate death. And that's what no one's talking about in Congress. Like, I don't care who anyone is, right? And part of the reason why is that it's not politically salient for either side. Yeah, and so I've interviewed tons of Democrats who've paid, in my opinion, like lip service, right, to this issue. And, the disappointment for me is like their ignorance, right? Yeah. It's like, I'm like, man, like you should know because you say you know, or you say you care. But like, it's like everyone only speaks up when it's like a mass shooting with an AR-15 and everyone kind of like goes back to bed when it's not. Yep. And that's just like really unfortunate. And so I'm going to get a little dark here. But so I feel like my job is to speak for like the other, if that's 2% of the other 98%. Yeah. Like to hold, something for the other 98% of the dead. Yeah. And so I don't forget the other 2% and I like report on them and like, something messes up, right? Like I'm there. But, at the same time, like, we can't forget the commonality of like what you and it's like, I remember meeting this person who worked at a hospital and they kind of were studying gun violence from a public health perspective. Okay. And they put it in this way. It's like, if everyone in the country is like looking at like spleen cancer, right? But most of us are dying from breast cancer. And we're kind of ignoring that. Yeah. You're like, but what about that spleen though? Right. I mean, spleen's super scary, right? And it's like getting a lot of attention and it really is. But it's like, but is it getting attention at the expense or in lieu of like the most common killers, right? Mm-hmm. And like, why is that? And one of the things that we find is that like, all right, let me just hit you with some basic stuff, right? Like, we have a federal tracing system that can trace the origin of like guns from crimes like back to their origin point. Okay. It's very useful in kind of finding out arms trafficking patterns, problematic gun stores, all sorts of things like that, right? We spend, millions of dollars on this system and we allow every law enforcement agency, the thousands of law enforcement agencies, including, I believe it's in the double digits, but a lot of other foreign nations, to use it as well, right? Huh. And so, anyway, Mexico's our number 2 user, just to put that out there, because we have a Spanish version and they use it a lot. Meanwhile, I just want to start with that. Meanwhile, there are police departments in America who just don't even use the system. They don't use the system. ATF goes around, they send trainers being like, hey, they're like, you should trace every gun. They call it comprehensive tracing. Even if you find like a gun, like you just found one, like trace it. It doesn't have to be in a murder because like it could have been in a murder down the line or like whatever. Please trace it. And they're like, no. Right? Like they just won't do it. When it comes to a ballistic matching software, right? So you see CSI, right? And you guys watch TV and you guys think like, oh my God, they have that technology. And like they do. In many ways they do. I'm going to tell y'all a secret. When it comes to guns, they ain't pressing on button many times. And so we found that like, out here in California, the state that's like, so like, they're really like championing, we're going after guns. They don't run the ballistic matching software. They don't run the traces and stuff. Like a lot of departments don't even run the basic stuff, right? And so that's why when we look at the FBI clearance for homicides, there's a coin toss that they're going to find your killer if it's, manslaughter. It's 50-50 right now.
Because they're just like, I can't be bothered to do that.
It's just kind of like a crazy thing where you just like I said, these are the same departments that come out here and they're like, we're going to do gun buybacks and like we're trying to get guns off the street and stuff and that's really great to get resources from the mayor and everything like that.
Sure.
But when it comes to just like the internal workings of that department, are they dotting their I's and crossing their T's when it comes to just the basics of gun violence, using the laws that are already in place and the tools that are already in place? And what we find is overwhelmingly no. In fact, to add to that, we find that many police departments across the country, when it comes to the weapons that they actually carry on their duty belts, they sell those back to the public too.
What? How?
So this was like one of like my kind of like crazy landmark investigations, but
Okay.
yeah. So, police departments, right? Let's talk about like just police militarization here for a second, right? So everyone's talking about the police have all this new equipment, right? They got new rifles over here. They got new this, they got new that and all this other stuff. And so we need to stop and ask ourselves a question. Well, what happens to all the old shit? And so what a lot of police departments do is they take those weapons and they sell those off or they trade those off, and they use that to build credit or to pay for new equipment. And what they do is they kind of broker contracts with many times gun distributors and dealers who create some sort of swapping program. And then what they do is they essentially sell those weapons, they dump those weapons back out to the public. Now, here's a problem, right? Two things. First of all, these weapons are usually high-grade weapons, right?
Yeah.
Because they're trusted by the police and they're
Yeah.
maintained by the police. The second thing, though, is that they're sold at a discount, right? Because they kind of come out in waves, right? So it's like, a police department sells 1,200 Glocks at a time. Damn. It's like a fire show out there. And so the problem comes in this question, which is you have these like police departments who were going out and being like, hey, we're so sad about these guns. We're going to give you coupons and vouchers and stuff if you turn in your old rusty pistols. And meanwhile, they're selling 2,000 police grade weapons back out the back door. And I'm just going to tell you, like when you go to the ATF, right? And the people who run all these traces and you ask them what's going on, they find these police guns in crimes.
Yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense.
And I'm working on, I can't say here,
Yeah.
it's still too early, but I ended up having to sue the federal government over this. We went up to 8th Circuit and we won. It was like 4 years of fighting because the Department of Justice and the ATF, who house this information, of course, want to protect all of these police departments who have had their guns implicated in crimes. But we sued for that information. We have attained that number, and we know that it is huge.
Yeah.
It's huge. And so and so I'm just going to put it from my perspective, right? So I'm looking at the same stuff that you're looking at, right? I'm looking at people who, are watching TV and they're kind of like screaming or whatever on whatever side of the fence about mass shootings and AR-15s and stuff like that. And I'm holding the receipts on the police selling guns that are in crimes.
Yeah.
The guys who are at the podium, right? I'm like, I'm going to tell you something, right? Let's talk about give you a specific where that came up for me, which was Uvalde, Texas. And so the Texas Department of Public Safety was there. And, the story was that there was a person who went into that school, they started shooting, and the police like really were hesitant to get in. And and so a lot of people were very critical, particularly of the Texas Department of Public Safety, the state troopers. And I just remember being on Twitter and people were like, how could they? Like, what were they thinking? Like this, that, and the other, and all this other stuff. And I'm like, okay, they failed that day, but let's talk about the other 364 days is kind of the conversation. And when it came to those 364 days, right? So on the day of Uvalde, they cared about gun violence. But when I go through their receipts, these guys had imported weapons through a federal ban using their law enforcement status is like sniper rifles. And then they were able to sell those back on the market at an upcharge because they were so rare here. And that's exactly what they did. They were definitely, I have receipts on that. You can look that up on my bylines right now about how Texas state troopers sold a bunch of military grade weapons back out to the public. And so I don't know what they feel like. So people are like, well, how do you think they feel about gun violence? How do you think they think about it? And I kind of look at and I say, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not so cut and dry now, is it?
No. So yeah, and so that's my job. It's happy.
It's very light.
It's happy. I'm not upset about anything at
Yes.
all. Oh my god,
Yeah.
I'm going to stretch this knee.
Yeah,
Hang on.
stretch a knee. Gotta make sure that your joints be working. Otherwise, how you gonna chase down them bad guys?
It's also leg day, I think. So I'm just
Yeah. I have been doing bed day for the past couple days.
like, stop, girl. I thought last time you were like, I'm gonna get ripped.
I mean, I was, and then my friend was just like, "Hey, you wanna be ill and not the way that you wanna be? Like, you're not gonna be the illest. You're just gonna get a little bug." And I'm like,
Then it's comeback time.
damn it. Yeah, so tomorrow maybe I'll start doing my push-ups and my pull-ups again. I got a pull-up bar right there.
You can pull up?
I could do like one. I'm starting. He
All
can
right.
do like so many. He's swole.
For real, like, girl, you should train. What are you doing?
know.
Train. It's like, you would love it. I don't know how this changed into that. You would
Let's
love
talk
it.
about me training. Here's the thing. I want to get better at surfing. So I'll do whatever gets me better at that.
That's what I was about to say.
I'll do whatever.
What is your failures in surfing right now?
Honestly, it is paddle power
Okay.
and popping up fast enough to get on steep, fast waves.
Easy. Your explosive strength would go up exponentially.
Okay.
Right. That's going to be no thing. Right. No, this is perfect. But here's the thing. There's two things that you haven't mentioned about why I think you should get into lifting and like resistance training. Okay. One is you have not talked about injury prevention.
Uh-huh.
See, I actually got into lifting
Yeah.
because of surfing.
Oh.
Yeah. I did not look like this a couple years. When I moved here, I did not look like this.
Yeah.
Okay. And so what happened was I was surfing right out here and I dislocated my shoulder. I dislocated my shoulder twice, right?
No way.
Yeah. And so it was like my first big boy injury. And where it like wouldn't go away.
I didn't even think about that as like being a thing. Like my shoulder, like my
So I
neck and my
fell
calves
like
are...
this and it went bop and it just came out, right? And then so what happened is so I went to the doctor and the doctor was like, well, hell, welcome to like just the realities that you're getting older. And
Yeah.
and
He was like, "Do you even lift, bro?"
kind of he was. So what happened was I went to this like physical therapist and he was like this ex-football player guy, right? And so he's there with like, like older people who are just trying to, like squeeze the tennis ball 3 times and stuff. Just get my fingers back, right?
Yeah.
And so he's very excited to see me. He's like, "Oh man, like, oh."
You can do a thing.
He's like, "Okay, like we can." I'm just a regular dude. I'm an injured man, actually. I'm not even regular.
Injured man.
I'm just an injured man.
Hello, I have an
And so, yeah, I'm an injured man with a hurt shoulder. I can't, like, put like a passenger side seatbelt on or anything, right? It's like hurting like that. It won't go away for months on end.
Dang.
And so this is what he tells me, right? He's like working with me and it's getting better. It's like really good. And he says, here's the thing. I'm going to tell you. He's like, this is my job. My job is to get you back to like able to shut a cabinet, right, without pain. But he was like, if you want to go and do any activities, if you want to do anything like that, he was like, your shoulder has become unstable enough that it's just gonna keep you're
coming
gonna
out.
always have that as a risk if you fall. Right, until you start talking about doing all sorts of like internal surgeries, which typically just kind of just go downhill.
Yeah.
And I was just like devastated. And so he's like, if you ever want to get back to like anything, right, with durability, he was like, you could do with like a lot of football players and stuff too. And I was like, all right, tell me what you need. I'm a journalist. I'm a nerd. Okay. So I'm like, I don't know about that, but tell me about science. And so he was like, listen, you can build the supporting structures up. Right. And so essentially he's like, if that will make it hard for that joint to slip out, you'll have all this muscle around it. You'll have all this tissue around it. And I was like, okay. And so I went to the gym. And I didn't know anything about lifting. I never had a gym membership. I never walked in. I've been in the military. I've done like calisthenics, push-ups and stuff like that, like flutter kicks, whatever those are, burpees, just mostly torture exercises.
That's what I'm doing. I'm just torturing.
Don't torture yourself. Those don't do any. Stop. Those are just busy work. All right. Those are things that like in the military. Those are things that they're like you
want to suffer.
Didn't iron your clothes right. Like that's not to get you fit. That's just to like make you think twice. And you don't have to do that to yourself unless you're being paid, like unless it's your GI Bill or something. And so
my own GI Bill.
Yeah, like you're just in here doing it for free. Like girl,
that's what I've been
like,
doing.
The Navy's over here. Like, and so no, like you can build those, supporting structures. And like I said, I never went to a gym and I met a person and they were like, just do this and eat a lot of protein. And the great thing about this is that there's a lot of crap out there. Wow. I had to put my investigative reporting skills to like, I did because there's so much stuff. But the great thing is there are a lot of universities that, have a lot of money that are like in sports programs that are attached that have done studies and being like, hey, this is what actually has worked. And so the internet's just like the great equalizer. And so, when I started lifting and started eating my protein and like I didn't stop and then I was like, oh, okay, like I have like a little bicep vein. And then like, but the longevity thing was like a huge thing about it, just the injury prevention. But the other thing is the mental clarity,
I'll do, my main thing, surfing, you see my boards. I also really like acro yoga. I know you've been over here to the greens.
Okay, I'll make fun of you.
Flipping and flying and
stuff.
stuff.
No. I don't make fun of those people.
It's fun, honestly.
It looks, it's like, so that's like you have the dude under you kicking around. See, that's the thing.
Flipping you around, flying.
Like I'd have to be the kicker.
Standing.
I'd be the kicker. That don't seem as fun. I'm gonna keep it real. That don't seem as fun to me.
Dude, you get to be like the show off because you're like strong as fuck and you can throw a person in the air.
And I like what? See.
And then you're like, ta-da! Look at how strong I am. And
I'm
like, yeah.
I watch the content of the acro, and it's always like some beautiful woman on just some legs. Like they cut the guy off essentially. They're like, ain't nobody need to see him. We need to see her get fucking hamster wheeled around. I know what I'm talking about.
I know a lot of
I'll go over
acro
there.
people,
I'll stand there.
And I just came back from Burning Man. I camped with Swing City, who are the acro people from Santa Monica. And they are not getting cut off. These guys are
What do they call the guys under there?
Base.
Respect your bases out there. Respect your base out there.
Yeah.
I'll do it if I'm respected.
Yeah, I mean, literally, okay, I've done acro all over the world at this point. I'm not great, but it makes a difference having a good base. If you have someone who's like sloppy, like I try to base people, I can do a couple things, but like do not trust me with your life.
Is it more agility or like strength? I feel like I got some quads, so I don't want to like and you fly off or something.
Well, it's strength and flexibility and like muscle control. Like you have to be able to like control like tiny little parts of your muscle.
I could do that. This seems Kate.
You should come to acro.
Okay. Okay. Don't
So
embarrass me
that
out
is,
here.
it's honestly, so the reason why I like acro and think it's so cool and different than other things is not only do you have to have strength, but you have to have balance and you have to have a very strong mind-body connection, which is something that's very overlooked in a lot of things.
Right. I could see that, but especially up there on the top.
Yeah.
That's on you.
Because you
You're
have
the
to be
high
able to
risk.
feel different parts of your body and how you're engaging it
Right.
and making sure you're like stacking yourself and engaging correctly
Right.
with good posture where you're like really stable, but you also have to communicate very effectively with another person
Right.
while you're doing all of that.
How do you communicate?
Oftentimes it's by like pressure and a touch or like moving in a different way or like shifting. Sometimes it's verbal too, but like things are happening kind of quickly, so you can't.
Yeah,
like,
well, I was about to say, I
write
don't
a
see
novel.
a lot of words when I go
Yeah.
by. I don't, or see a lot of words. See, I'm so like written. I don't see a lot of
I
words.
don't be seeing them words.
That's how no, I don't hear a lot of talking,
Yeah.
right? Like I come by and I'm like, oh my God, are they psychically linked or something?
So
Is it
those are
like,
the people
yeah,
who are like
eye
very
contact or something?
practiced, and they're like, we came and we did this transition to this transition,
Okay.
and we're just grinding it out. We're like finessing it. But then there's people who show up like me, and I'm like, I don't remember what anything's called. Like, you gotta like tell me how to do it.
Oh,
Like, I need you to
right.
direct me.
Wow. Okay, I'll do it.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
convinced. It's OB. I have nothing else to do. Except, like, seriously, I'm like that sounds fun to me.
yeah.
Especially, so you do acro.
Acro, surfing.
Surfing.
I like to dance. I've been
Okay.
into like Latin dance, like bachata and
I
salsa.
think you told me this.
And I mean, it's obviously like rhythmic and stuff, but like you have
Right.
to have some like mind body control
Yeah,
and like,
yeah.
communication with another person. And I'm trying to get more into climbing. I went
Okay.
on my first climbing trip with my friend Brian. Shout out to Brian. And he makes it look like so effortless.
I mean, yeah, I've gone with some climbers. Like, I went out with like my homegirl Alexa, who's like really into like bouldering and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And it was way more mental than I like totally thought. Because I was like, I was like powering through and just doing all this other stuff, and then I was like, oh, this is a maze on the side of a wall where I'm fighting gravity,
Yep.
and I can't like just yeah. So I get that.
It's cool because it's like it's a physical challenge,
Yeah.
but it's a mental challenge equally.
Oh my God, and yeah, the soreness was like definitely.
Yeah.
My back was feeling
For
hella toe up.
sure. What I do most of the time is like I just go to like Joshua Tree and like scramble, just like move around on rocks and stuff. But actually like being belayed by someone, like I got this. There's a rope tying to me. Like
Then
I
you
can
need
do
to
it,
lift.
but then your arms get
you
pumped
still
so
have a
fast.
gap where you need to lift. And I'm going to tell
Yeah.
you why.
Okay.
Because you don't have a place where you could bring that fire out.
Yeah.
That mental fire.
Yeah.
Right? These are all, hey, this is like such a testament to like your personality, because I see you must be like a very like happy, peaceful person, because you're just like, oh yeah, I like to, like to dance with friends. I like to be on the ocean, like vibe with nature. But every once in a while, right? And this is what keeps me focused, right? I feel like I need that one place where it's just like, I need to just like, right? Like just put some
Yeah.
like fuel out, right? You know what I mean? And like that is the gym.
Okay.
Right? Like I feel like you chill a little bit better too, like
True.
when you come across like threats in the natural environment, because I'm like, you know what? Like I'm gonna save this because I got like 400 pounds to lift. Right? Like what? Like you messed up on the order. I'm gonna keep this. I'm gonna use this later.
I literally
you
tried to
know.
pick up like 2 30-pound weights the other day, and I was like, I cannot do this. Let me just walk away.
Oh, but here's the thing. Like, the great thing too is that it's so rewarding though, because your body, when you start lifting, it gains strength so fast.
Really?
It really does. Like, so everyone knows the newest person in the gym, right? Everyone knows the newest person in the gym because they just stack on weights every day.
Dang.
You do. Everyone knows about it. You stack on weights every day. It's like, because it's genetics. It's like you're so far away from your genetic set. Like you have this, like you're just your genetic kind of capabilities to put on muscle that like when you start, right? you touch a weight and your body's just going to react. And so if you put yourself on like a, consistent plan of what they call like progressive overload, right? Which is like you put, you do more reps or more weight, you can go up really quick in your first year. You put on a lot of muscle very quick in your first year. And this is what all the movie stars and stuff do for like that transformation. They're essentially using that like first year kind of like that first year
like
kind
glow
of
up.
Yeah, you're kind of like a little seed waiting to sprout, and then that sprout has abs and they're like cool. And that's like, if you do it right, like you could do that in maybe like a year or two, you'll look totally crazy.
I think like the thing is, I'm not so like obviously like being shredded is cool and everything, but like I'm more about like the functional,
Well, see,
like
that's
movement.
what happens. That's what happened, right? Like that's what happens, I think, to most people. I don't think anyone would, maybe, but like I don't think anyone would do all of that for that long. In fact, that's why I think so many people don't do it for that long, right? Because they do it, you have to capture something else besides just like I think vanity. I think that's why so many people out there in the fitness like training community kind of talk about like, you need to make this a journey. You need to make this more about an experience. You need to make this more about learning, make this more about making friends along the way.
Yeah.
Like, make this more about a mental thing.
For sure.
Because like you're going to wake up some days and you're just going to be like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? like, what am I doing? And like, the other thing too is that like you in your mirror, like, do not actually recognize like change that rapidly within yourself. Like, do you notice yourself like age? It took me like a while before someone was like, oh, like you work out every once in a while maybe? And I was like, what? You notice? like, right? like
what? How?
Yeah. And so, you have to be in there and be like, I'm in here for like something else, I think.
Yeah. I want to get barreled. I want to have a party barrel in Nicaragua. I'm manifesting this. I don't know if this is a thing that's going to happen, but party barrel. Okay.
Explain a party barrel for?
We're going on a left. We're going on the wave. The wave is curling over, and you're inside of the lip of the wave. And then party barrel is when not only you're inside of the barrel, you're in there with someone else.
What?
This is crazy. Honestly, this is like pros don't even.
Yeah, this is like X Games stuff. That's what I was saying. It was like party barrel sounds like a cartoon thing. Yeah. Like it sounds like a dream that you had once.
I surf over here with my friends a lot at the pier, and one day we're coming back, and one of my friend's brothers was like, how was it? And I was like, dude, it was sick. Like, we got the sickest party, brother. He was like, no way. Are you kidding me? Like, yeah, we were in there. We were, like, holding hands.
What? No, photos
we were not. There aren't even barrels over here. Like, I can't get barrel. I can barely get up on a
like,
6
photos
wave.
didn't happen. Man, stop. You would have been... Someone would have captured that. It's a security camera or something out here.
Yeah, no.
There's so many cameras
ninja level shit. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But, you know what? If at some point...
But if you put it out there... If someone's listening to this,
the surf gods could make it happen.
You're the best.
Who wants to make it happen with me?
Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, I like to stop sucking at surfing. It's really funny because I've been surfing almost 2 years now. Not even.
Really?
And people are like, oh, you've been surfing for a while now. Like, you must be pretty good. Like, you surf a lot. And I'm like, no. I'm terrible. Anyone who's seen me surf, they're like, you're gonna get there someday. And I'm like, it ain't today.
You look the part. Like I said, I have damaged myself. I've also, so I got the dislocations.
Yeah.
I got hit by a stingray.
Oh, that sucks. Yeah, I've been fortunate enough not to yet. But I have had sea urchins all up in my feet. Don't love those.
Yeah, I've done sea urchins. I have tweezers in my backpack. In fact, I was in St. Kitts earlier this year, and everyone but me got hit with like a sea urchin.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, oh, and I had the tweezers. I was just like the hero of the day. I was like, yeah, you know, I was from the Coast Guard. I was like, oh, this is us. This is all of us. Medical aid was rendered. And so, but yeah, I'm just like the sea creatures out there. No,
there's so many ways to get fucked up.
Let me tell you something.
Honestly.
The stingray is the worst. The stingray is because the mental is I didn't even do anything.
Yeah, like why you coming for me,
I was
bro?
successful. I was a successful day. I was in PB, and I don't know, and maybe this is something that like someone in your comments section or something could talk about, where it's like do stingrays attack like on a bad day, or like, because I felt like I was killing that day. I don't think I ever did as well as I did. Right.
They're trying to humble you. Like, oh, you think you know?
Yeah, I was like,
no.
What? Like, it was like, I was like,
Sounds
I
like
can
a secret.
surf. Like, the sun came out, like a Jesus ray hit my face. I was like, I'm doing it. I'm out here, like, I can't fail. And then I actually finished a ride, and like, I was like in the shallows, just kind of came off and just, and I stepped on something. I was like, oh, that's glass. I was like, it's like, doesn't even feel like anything. I put my foot up and I was like, I don't even see anything. And so I actually went back out for a bit. Right? I'm stupid, man. And then so I came back maybe like a minute or two later, and this entire crowd of people were like screaming at me. They're like, look. And I was like, what's going on? And I had all these like bloody footprints trailing behind me. And then that's when I was like, I was like, what's happening to me?
Like, my life just changed.
Yeah, I was like, oh no. And then this lifeguard drives up in this truck, and he's like, yeah, you need to get in like right now. And then that poison hit. But the thing is that it's just a mental thing, right? And so, yeah, it sucks, blah, 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 blah. It's like everyone who's been hit with one knows it's like the dumbest, stupid thing ever. But the thing is I wasn't doing anything. It's like sticking your hand into the mailbox and it's like a poisonous animal there. It's like, fuck. And so every time you go to the mail, you have to, it's the beach.
Yeah.
Every time I'm out there, it's like, huh? Like,
I just treat the ground like it's lava, and I just try to get on my board as soon as possible and do not touch the ground as much as possible, because the ground is lava. There's
that's what I feel like, and I've like gone with friends before, and they think I'm like insane. I'm like,
I do it because I mean, I was surfing in Puerto Rico, and it's like mostly reef break there, and there's sea urchins everywhere, and like you can get cut up on the reef and stuff. So here, I just have this like mental thing, even though I know it's beach break, I'm like, don't touch the ground because there could be something down there.
Continue the training. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the thing. Like, there's just so many things you have to think about surfing.
Yeah.
That's why it takes so long to get good.
Well, that's what I was saying. You should lift, because you don't have to think about much of anything. That's the other thing. That's what I was saying, the mental thing, because the other things are very much partner things, right? And so you're definitely looking at like feedback and all this other stuff. And then, you know, when you're out there surfing, you are dealing with nature. You're dealing with a vehicle. Like, let's keep it real. You're dealing with like board control. You're dealing with other people. You're dealing with like all these parameters. You're dealing with Mother Nature, just all sorts of stuff like that, right? It's pretty mentally taxing.
It is. A lot of processing, computing.
Yeah, you're doing a lot. You know, you're doing a lot. At the gym, I feel like I'm not doing much. Not like in the mental way. It's like, you know, like I'm writing my scripts, right? Like I'm like very much thinking, or like in just like a more like basic state, and I'm just like, it's good. It's a good
now I'm thinking about like all the activities I do except for yoga, I'm like processing a lot of information.
I mean, haven't you ever been upset about anything? Haven't you ever been like stressed out? Haven't you ever just been like, yo?
I guess that's another thing that I do. I'm in run club, and that is my like, okay, you're gonna be upset. Go like run 7 miles.
That's a good. So I started off actually as a runner.
Yeah.
My like, so the thing that I brought to lifting was running. And so like, and what I mean by that was I felt that running is like a very similar thing. It's it's pretty intense, right? It's very intense, actually, I think. But it was something that like I learned how to do, and I got like in a habit, and I started and I sucked and I worked my way up like in mileage and stuff like that. And just like when you run, you also understand that there's like a technique to running.
Totally, yeah.
Right? There's an efficiency to running. And so and what you realize is to get that efficiency in running, you will not do it right with a lesson. You will not do it in a single stride or three.
Yeah.
It'll be right 1,000 strokes, essentially.
Totally.
Right? And so that's very similar to like lifting.
Okay.
Like you're not going to bench press. There's this like whole thing of like, oh, you need perfect form and all this other stuff. But you don't. Because the thing is that like the reality is that to get that form, you're going to have to do 1,000 reps of crap, right? Before it finally kind of locks in, right, into the most efficient way.
Okay.
And sure, you'll always know some theories. You'll always know just like running. And so that was I was like, sure, I was running like 6 days a week and, at like my peak and like, 10 miles a day. Especially in summers in like Austin, I was out there. And so.
That's gnarly.
So by the time I was like an air conditioned gym, like.
You're like, oh man, this is
not so.
nice.
Yeah, it's not so bad.
Yeah,
it's not so bad at all. I get to stop every once in a while and like.
That's so true. I started running when COVID started, because like we couldn't do anything else.
Right, except just run around and like fucking. You could barely run around. They were like closed beaches for a second.
Trained for a half marathon during COVID, and then obviously didn't get to attend it because COVID went on forever.
You couldn't get together.
But I ran it by myself, and then I don't remember. I guess it was 2021. They had the San Diego half marathon, so I ran that too. And then now I'm like kind of chilling. I'm like running like 4 miles here and there.
So wait a second. So on your channel here, has anyone ever interviewed you? Who are you? What do they have on your channel?
I've mostly been interviewing other people, just like
who are you?
What you're about, man.
Where do you come from?
So I was born in Iowa, and I moved to Texas when I was like 17 years old. On a whim, I was like, I want to not be here. Where can I go? And I was like, well, LA seems cool. Austin seems cool. New York seems cool. I'm too broke for those other ones. I'm going to Austin. And
I mean, now you can't do that. Like, what? It's like so crazy now. But okay, so
this was like
from
2007.
Iowa.
Yeah. Okay. And so I got down there and lived with a friend and was just doing hood rat things with my friends, as one does when you're a teenager in Austin. This was like the golden age, like South by like still hadn't blown cheap. Up.
Yeah,
I was hanging out with like the cool kids, like that R&B or hip hop group. A little bit of gold in the page.
I feel like I was like, I wonder if I like came across you or ran across you.
Probably, yeah. So I was just down there.
There's only like 5 spaces, and Austinites always go to the same damn spaces at the same times. It feels like.
Yeah. Beauty bar, was that place Black and Tan?
Yeah, it's like all the same types of places. Chirp Charlie's, yeah.
Which is still a thing. It's in a different spot now, but still very cool. It was just down there. I don't even know what I was up to, honestly. Trying to like start design. Yeah, I work professionally as a designer.
Okay. That's why did you get into design? Okay, so wait a second. How did you move at 17?
I'm like a fiercely independent person.
Okay. So yeah, you thought you were just gonna glance over that.
Yeah.
And so I'm the captain now. No, so,
damn it, no, my podcast.
So I went ahead and pulled your criminal record here. No,
yeah,
I'm just kidding. There's
some
like
good juicy stuff in there. That one time I stole that tank. You heard about that.
You are an arms trafficker, and that's why I'm here. So you were like, all right. So wait a second. You were like, all right. I'm done with my fam. You didn't have any friends in Iowa or anything?
I mean, I had friends, but I was like, is this really what I'm gonna be
but not just playing. Okay. So how were you in high school? Wait a second. Let's get
in high school.
Because this opens
up
a whole can of worms.
How do you think that I was in high school?
I mean, all right. Piecing it together, you're white.
I'm white.
From Iowa. I mean, let's see. You're in choir, right? Is that what you're in choir?
I was in choir.
Okay, it's pretty dorky.
I was in orchestra. I was also in the art department.
Okay, so you're an artsy kid?
Yeah.
You're an art kid?
I'm an art and music
Okay.
kid.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was my background. And I was also a rebel.
Okay.
But not like doing drugs, drinking. I never did any of that.
Okay.
I was not about it. Everyone looked at me and was like, you look like you would do some shit. And I was like, I'll come for you. Like, I will come for you. But I'm not going to do any crazy stuff. Like, I'm sober. I'm chilling. I'm happy. And
but you're not happy.
But
you're like,
I was
I'm
like
getting
angsty.
the fuck out of here.
I was like a little emo kid.
Okay.
And yeah, no, I wasn't happy with living in Iowa, to be clear, at any point in my life. I remember as a child, like,
I feel that.
Is this what we're for real doing? Like, wearing cargo shorts and, like, college football tees and, like, listening to country music? Like, I was not made for this. How do I escape this reality?
Wow, I mean, this is my thing. This is my thing. That's how I was.
Yeah, like, I can't do this. And so I was like, I need to get as far away from here as possible. And so, yeah, like, on a whim was like, hey, friend, you want to just, like, not be here now? Like, forever? And my friend was like, yeah, that sounds dope. Let's do that. And so we just got in the car and we're like, hey, we're in Texas. Stopped in Dallas, met up with some people that we met through MySpace.
Okay, wow, Jesus. Okay.
And they were like, you would love it here. Let's do it. And then we just straight up moved to Austin. And I was like, all right, I'm going to go to the Arts Institute, do graphic design. Met some people, decided not to do that. And things got a little off the rails there, but kind of reel it back in. I did go to school for design. But in that process, I ended up really, like, reconnecting with my love for the Spanish language.
You would do that in Texas, especially.
Yeah. And I was
especially
like,
there.
Just, it's something that I just, like, really felt, like, ease and, like, excitement with. And my teacher was like, oh, you're actually pretty good at this. You should go, like, live abroad because that's how you're going to get fluent.
Right.
So I did. I went and I lived in Barcelona. I studied Estudios Hispánicos at the University of Barcelona. And then after that, I went and lived in Buenos Aires, Argentina, where I studied diseño gráfico at University of Belgrano. And then I was like, you know, I love Barcelona. I'm going to go back and do that.
So what are your people back in Iowa thinking?
I don't even know. Like, straight up, don't even know.
Damn!
I was just like, this is what I'm going to do. And so I tried to make Barcelona happen. I went back. I had a job interview, got a job offer. And then they were like, yeah, we can't sponsor you. It's going to take like 9 months. Like, it's super hard to get a work visa as an American in Europe. So I went back to Austin. And I was like, all right, finished school. I was going to St. Ed's. Started working at like a web boutique.
Very awesome.
And yeah.
That's very awesome.
Just transitioned into user experience design. Got my master's degree. Came out to San Diego. And here I am in Ocean Beach. Learning how to surf, letting people flip me around.
I mean, yeah, no, this is like a dope little
people to take away from this interview. We talked about a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Let's see. When you see American gun violence, know that we get what we pay for, which, according to a lot of investigative reporting, is pretty much nothing. And so, yeah, you know, we laugh at it. It's normal. And I had this as a quote from a guy, but he said it so well. He was like, he lost a bunch of people and he was looking at shootings and he said, it's normal. It's not normal, but it's normal. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of like a good way of putting it. And so, yeah, when you see those systems, right, it's often not malice. It's often, right, just incompetence. Yep. And I don't know if that's, you know, there's a lot of reporters out there that are like solutions people. I'm not that. I'm firmly in the problem department. I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we're looking at it quite yet. I think this is going to be something that, you know, will probably outlast me, right, and all of us here. But that means there's a lot of good stuff to like break down, right? We just, everything's kind of the Wild West out here. We actually don't know what's really killing us. And so every bit that we could carve out, we understand, right, that a bit better. And hopefully, I think if we carve out enough information, people will be able to come up with something not stupid.
Yeah.
Right? That people will be like, yeah, we can come up with something that can take a little bit of the pressure off. There's not going to be something that's going to flip the switch like overnight. There's not going to be like, we get rid of this, you get. That never works for anything. That just doesn't, that's not policy on, no policy ever works like that, right?
Yeah.